Welcome to the Horsemouth Podcast. It's my excuse to meet fascinating people and learn how they approach work, creativity, and problem solving. My guest today is a Bangalore-based entrepreneur and the co-founder and CEO of Tap Invest, a fintech platform offering fixed income investment opportunities. In 2015, he completed his BTech in manufacturing engineering from IIT Kharagpur. 5 years later, in 2020, he graduated from IIM Ahmedabad with a postgraduate degree in management. Between these two educational milestones, he worked as an analyst for a mortgage and real estate listing startup and designed Mentee Club, a mentorship platform connecting mentors and mentees across 16 career disciplines. During his time at IIM Ahmedabad, he was a fellow at the Institute's Center for Innovation, Incubation and Entrepreneurship. He also launched Project 2.2, an online journal focused on coffee reviews, narratives on the specialty coffee space, and experimental findings. After completing his post-graduation, he began his career as a private equity professional, which eventually led him to embark on his entrepreneurial journey. Founded in 2021, Tap Invest has grown rapidly, raising $2 million in funding last year. Formerly known as Leaf Round, the company's mission is to make financial freedom accessible to all. This afternoon, however, this brilliant entrepreneur, whose voice is often heard in the boardrooms of some of the most esteemed companies, has perhaps made the poorest investment decision of his career, agreeing to spend his time on my Nanoscale podcast. A quick disclaimer, this episode is not for financial advice. Instead, we'll explore my guest's approach to leadership, creativity, and problem solving. To learn more about Tap Invest, visit their website at tapinvest.in and find them on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, and YouTube. You can also connect with today's guest on Instagram at Nischay Nath. And now, please enjoy my conversation with Nischay Nath. Nischay, welcome.
Yes, thanks. Thanks, Shubhankar, so much.
So, Nischay, there's no easy way of getting into it, but I guess we have to address the elephant in the room, which is what's the biggest value of being associated with IIT Kanpur and IIM Ahmedabad?
IIT Kharagpur.
Oh, sorry. Let me ask you again. What's the biggest value of being associated with these two names, IIT Kanpur and IIM Ahmedabad?
IIT Kharagpur.
Why have I written Kanpur?
Yes,
IIT because it's IIT K, so I think it's
that's right.
IIT Kharagpur and IIM Ahmedabad. What's the biggest value of being associated with these two names?
I think these two colleges have I've come across some of the most smartest people. Kharagpur or IIT, I would say, was people who were more genius in terms of IQ, and they were able to crack that system in those 10, 12th formative years, right? IIM, on the other hand, I found very deeply motivated people, because undergrad is more of a choice driven by family. Postgrad is a choice you make and a liability that you take on yourself, right? So there's a lot of effort that you put over there. So these two brands have given me access to genius people and very hardworking people. These are some of the people who I continue to have in my network. Love meeting, love the conversations I share with them. I think the network is what I continue to carry through them. Another thing which these degrees help is in my hiring processes also, because it's easier for me to attract talent as well. So these two things.
People want to work for you.
People want to work for us. So they look up to those degrees quite a bit. And some of my more. I have that advantage of sorts.
So you were talking about the two different kind of people in say IIM versus IIT K. So are those two different intelligencies?
Yes.
So what kind of an intelligence? Because you have qualified for both. So could you tell me, is it like more left brain, right brain?
See, by the way, I do get confused between what left brain and right brain is.
Creativity and like logical reasoning.
I've seen that people in KGP or during IIT days, they were more logic oriented, and I think they've been able to crack those 10, 12. 10, 12 is more system, right? You have a system that you have to crack. You know how to get from point A to point B. So those were some of the things which I've seen are very good in logic-driven exercises. But when it comes to IMA folks, right? I've seen that these are people who've not just been top of their streams, but they also come from a variety of streams. We used to have about more than 40%, 45% of the batch is coming from outside of engineering, right? And even gender diversity wise, it's quite varied. We had people who were lawyers, models, entrepreneurs, pilots coming to the batch. I think the breadth of experience that we got was very different. So there's a lot more creativity and mix of creativity and logic which comes at IMA. So that was the difference between the two colleges.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So now another thing that I wanted to touch on before we get into your process and your specific management style or core values, I wanted to talk to you about synthesizing structured chaos. So you've described a startup as a series of experiments. In fact, I want to quote you. You said that, quote, we are developing structure in the form of milestones, timelines, and KPIs, and channeling our chaos with what we call experiments. We've been using this for the last few months and have converted many successful experiments into processes. Could you give me an example of an experiment that turned into a process? And what exactly are the steps one has to take to synthesize structured chaos?
I think you have to take a step back into thinking what exactly is a startup and why is someone really funding that startup, right? Or that idea. What's the difference between a business which is, say you're starting a business versus you're starting a startup, right? What's the difference between the two? The difference between, say, a business is something which is already proven. There is, say, if you're in the business of, say, selling chili, right? You know you have to buy chili from these 5 players and you have to sell it in this market and to these 10 players.
So there's
right?
a proof of concept.
So there's a proof of concept. There's an established business model which is there. And you put in, say, X capital, you get a 20% return on a year-to-year basis. It's a proven model, right? Businesses, there is only the risk of being able to run it in terms of operationalizing it and getting the capital, people, etc. But when it comes to a startup, right, there are people who are trying to invest in ideas which can become, say, 100x the value or 50x the value, right? So they are effectively paying an entrepreneur to create an opportunity. To create an opportunity, you don't really know if it will work or not. So you have to do experiments. You have to do, say, 10 things and see which two work, which two click. I'll give an example. I'm in a space which is not known. It's not very exciting also. Like equity or cryptos, they have that excitement quotient, right, to them. Ki if I can generate, say, a 3x, 4x, 5x of sorts, I could get a multi-bagger in place. But debt it's flat. It's like 12%. Stable. It's like stable, flat. It's not exciting as well, right? 12%, you feel like markets, mutual fund mein dal dunga to 14% mil jayega. So why do I put it in debt, right? It's not exciting. It's very difficult to communicate as well. Plus, finance professionals kind of make finance very complicated, adding so many terms and IRR and this and dirty price, clean price, so on and so forth. So we realized that how do we sell? Can a product sell, right? So what we did was we ran multiple experiments in the early days. We put up information. We created a WhatsApp bot with all the information that you can ask the WhatsApp bot. It will answer the respective questions. We put up questions in a Google Drive in a fact sheet. We created a website where you can see the information. We also trained a person internally who could explain that information. We created one particular option for you to request a callback, right? And all of these we ran, and we saw that request a callback was one of those features which we were able to implement all of this in like 2 days.
So people needed a relationship manager.
They wanted a relationship manager, but they wanted to give the consent to be able to request for a callback. So I don't want a callback now. I don't want to book a time slot. I don't want them to reach out to me directly. I want to tell them when to reach out to me.
Of course.
So that specific feature is what we were able to build. And eventually I did see a couple of months later that Amazon also has that feature. So possibly they came up with a series of experiments and they figured that, hey, request a callback is a kind of a critical feature. And today, 90% of my volumes come through that. So that was an experiment which then we said that, hey, let's build this better. And we kind of productized it. So now I have a 5-member team which sits behind that request callback as a feature.
So, for example, with this kind of iterative concept of like experimentation or whatever, say I have a design aesthetic in my mind for a website or for the UI UX. I don't know what is the right term, but like you said that it was kind of modeled around the Apple way or the Tesla website or whatever it is. Like there's a certain model. you experimented and you reached to that conclusion that this is perhaps the aesthetic that we are going for. When are you going to revisit that? Or when once you've finalized on an experiment, how far into the future are you now going to look back and say, okay, now we need to rework on that again? Maybe it is outdated.
I think there is I need to be very clear. For example, if I were to approach this, I need to be clear if am I in the business of selling that aesthetic or not, right? If that aesthetic is core to my business or not. If that aesthetic is core, I need to focus on it being a minimum of sorts. So what I'm getting to at is we have an approach that we have to create MVPs, like minimum viable products.
Okay.
Sometimes if the aesthetic is the minimum viable product, then we have to invest in creating that well.
Okay, so the minimum value product is not necessarily the product.
No, it's not the product.
Okay.
So experiments have to be done cheaply.
Okay.
Which means they'll not be the final outcome, but it's important to get things out there because you don't know if it will work with the customers or not. Sometimes you will spend months in creating something only for the customers to reject it and you will get demoralized.
Okay.
It's important to kind of get things out there fast, right? If design as an aesthetic is like a minimum viable product, then I'll have to think as to how can I do it cheaply.
Okay.
Some of the people who I found is, for example, I remember Ultra Human. They are in the business of selling an experience. They are in the business of selling their product is aesthetic, their website is aesthetic, and so on and so forth. They did not want to kind of spend too much time on creating those waitlist pages. So they used one website to create those automatic pages of sorts. And it was a very beautiful form that they had created using their website in their own thematic itself.
Like some sort of an AI?
Not an AI. It was like a website builder.
Okay.
But it kind of embodied their website aesthetics.
Okay.
So they figured out a cheaper way to do it.
Okay.
Then the second thing, you have to keep refreshing that aesthetic every now and then to keep the users engaged. But people also have a thing for either a novel product or a novel experience. If it's the same product, you have to bring in novelty in the experience. Otherwise, you change the product itself. Right? We ourselves see that our product has to go through multiple repackagings to keep the excitement level.
Like, I don't know if this will make sense to you, but I've been seeing recently that a lot of these fintech apps, or generally there is a gamification happening where, you're earning coins, and it almost looks like when you open the UI, it almost looks like a video game that, that will open. So, but that is not an aesthetic that you have gone for.
No. So, we are kind of building in that direction as well. We by the way have one more application which is for our HNI customers. There we have these gamifications in place.
There's the Tap Capital?
No, that's called Ultra.
Ultra Tap.
By the way, the Ultra is not live yet for public.
Okay.
It's only like access only. There, if you can make investments in like FDs and so on and so forth, and if you make an investment, you get the same amount of points. And then there is like merch or experiences that you can redeem it.
So the product is boring, but the experience is interesting.
Yes. Okay. So you have to kind of keep on innovating to keep users engaged. And I don't think any brand exists except some of these consumer brands, right? Like say something like Tata Salt. They are not really innovating on packaging or their experience because it's not required. It's just an essential of sorts, right? But here you have to kind of keep innovating on few things, few tweaks here and there.
Right. So, so now that wait, I'll just consult this. By the way, are you comfortable?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just keep this. Okay, so there are different directions that we can go in. You said that you were testing these products. It's very important for them to go out into the market as soon as possible. But you've also said that you've piloted products in closed circles and in very, very carefully curated, like these exclusive access only kind of places where these products get tested. I know you must be doing it because there must be a lot of advantages to it. What are the disadvantages?
I think I'll have to use examples to share the
disadvantages. Please, that's what I'm inviting. Yes.
Now, for example, right now we are running a pilot of this Ultra app itself, which is more of an HNI oriented product, right? There we have multiple offerings, and we're also weaving in a wealth management layer into it. The advantage is that I'm able to kind of bring people into the journey. People love sharing feedback, by the way. So I kind of position it in a way, hey, we're giving you private beta access. Can you share feedback with us? Because we'll iterate it. And then when we launch it for public, you would have contributed to that journey, right? Yeah. The con of it is that things are, by the way, they break a lot in that particular process, right? And then the customers are affected by that break. We kind of use that as hey, this is a private beta, hence it's breaking. But then those breakages, and you have to keep listening. And if you don't listen to them much, I think that kind of negatively does have a negative repercussion on the customers. Second thing is, there are certain investments that we do in terms of team, resources, time, so on and so forth. We have to give adequate time to private betas, for example. And those certain things do get delayed as well. So when we do experimentation, sometimes we do get excited that, hey, we want to get it out to the public, but we can't really do it till the time it stabilizes.
So you have to hold your horses.
Yeah. Some of the things, you can't really throw them out in the public because they're not really finished. And then you have to work on finishing them. And then getting the team to work on it and so on and so forth. So I think some things take time to be built out properly for the masses. So that is one of the cons which I see to that experimentation approach.
Okay. So 2 questions here.
Yeah.
First question is, so even with your alt investment space, if you were to look at the product market fit, I would assume that you're probably looking at your ideal customer is perhaps a person who has been investing in FDs all their life and wishes to switch to say another form of debt. Vis-a-vis, I think it will be easier for you to attract that kind of a person vis-a-vis a person who's in equity and now is not necessarily looking like a young person who's not necessarily looking for stability.
I'll put it differently. So we've defined the curve of this investor, like this adoption curve, right? So we've seen that there are investors in the market. There are close to some 10 lakh odd investors who actively invest in bonds as a product. Then there are close to 2.5 to 3 crore people who actively invest in stocks. Then there are 7 crore people who invest in mutual funds. And then there's like 50-60 crore people who invest in FDs and like then
debt.
No, I mean, that's the curve. Debt is not a category per se in the country, right? So we are kind of moving down that curve of sorts where we're targeting these active bond investors, then want to go to the active stock market investors, and then to the mutual fund investors.
Okay, so first you want to attack these people who are on the equity side.
Who are actually investing already in bonds.
Okay.
So there are so many people who invest in bonds already. They're already registered on some of the other platforms. So we're kind of targeting those customers. Our typical portfolio, our typical profile of these customers is generally they have 15 years of experience in investing in stock markets. And once you become more wealthier, you become more careful
Safer
of your capital, right? Yeah. And then you don't want to put in so much. Earlier, you will put 80% in equity. Dhire you will kind of reduce it to like say 50%, 30%, 20%. And where do you put the remaining money? You park it in real estate, FDs, so on and so forth. Bonds becomes a good option.
Right. So, to justify, so perhaps you're chasing the early adopters. Exactly, in that segment, right?
It happens heavily in the gaming sector, by the way. So all chips are generally designed for gamers. They are launched in gaming events.
Of course.
And then those gamers kind of, then they start talking about it. And then those wannabe gamers, they kind of start buying. And they just, they kind of follow them. And then
look at their streams on YouTube.
Look at the streams and so on and so forth. And they kind of start affecting the rest of the ecosystem as well. So there's like a adoption curve. And this generally happens in products which are more technical by nature. You look at coffee also, by the way. It's more technical and then it goes to
specialty coffee, you're saying.
Yeah, specialty coffee.
Okay, so now that what I was trying to lead to was that once you're looking at these early adopters and it may be perhaps easier for you to penetrate through them, but I think one of the points that you discovered was you needed to simplify communication.
Yes.
Right. So apart from simplifying communication, because I know like for me to convince my mother or my father to get into an alt investment space like invoice discounting, what have you found to be the key insight into converting that customer from, even if they are like primed for your product like an early adopter would, but still what is that one thing that one push that is necessary for you to convert them?
So in investments, it's very important to trial. The ability to trial a product is the only way to learn the product. You can learn as much theory, you can listen to as many people, you can read as many articles, but till the time you don't make that 10,000 rupee investment or 1,000 rupee investment, you will not. Everybody's stock market journey starts that way. Our FD journey starts when our parents do it, right? Or even insurances, when we purchase, it's generally through the parents' route that we have done. There always has to be an introduction through trial. You see the crypto space. The reason why crypto space boomed in India during the 2021 wala wave was because companies were giving 100 rupees of crypto on just creating an account. Right? That allowed people to see as to how crypto works of sorts. So trialing is a very important concept that we are trying to crack in the space of investments. That's required.
Okay, so now we'll jump topics a bit. What are your 13 core principles?
I have them on my phone. 14 hai वैसे.
14, okay.
The 14 core principles. So these are principles that have taken us close to 2 years to discover. And these are principles that we have seen in the people around us, or our backgrounds have influenced us. By people around us means the people who are building Leaf Tap, right, at the same time. It starts with literally think MVP as to all of those principles, right, are around how do you approach problem solving, how do you approach day-to-day work. Startups are all about problem solving and then eventually cracking the problem and then scaling it, right, and then getting the execution staff to kind of bring in and start working on those. So all of our principles are around think MVP, think how the number one guy would do, what kind of challenges do you want, how would you solve them, right? Thinking about you are always at war and bringing that passion onto the table, right? So all of those principles are around how do you approach problem solving and day to day.
What is the most useful principle of them all that you can just like easily rely on?
I think think MVP and first principles thinking, right? That's the most core, one of the core principles that are there.
So I wanted to come to first principles thinking.
There's another one, by the way, know the why. Know the why. If you don't have clarity over the reason of what you're doing, you'll never have the motivation enough to be able to push through it. And
can you explain that a little bit?
I believe that everybody has a lot of options or choices in life. And there's always this one choice which is more exciting than all the others. And when you do those, and if you can reflect on those moments when you really did something which you were deeply passionate about, it could be cooking, it could be anything of that kind, right? I think the amount of effort you put in, or amount of you that you put in into that is magical of sorts. That experience is very magical, right? I think if you could bring that into say work which is supposed to be productive of sorts and getting you certain resources and all, I think that's a great state to be in. And what I see is that many people, especially my people, right, at TAP, I've seen that if they don't know what they're doing and why they're doing that, they can't connect the dot to the future of their efforts. So knowing the why is important to connect the effort with the outcome. That equation you need to kind of
is this like a long way of saying follow your passion?
No. Follow your passion. I'm not saying follow your passion. Sometimes passions, you don't want to make money off your passions, right? Because you lose the passion. Different thought processes are there. But I think you should know the why of why are you doing what you're doing, right? That is it's like connecting the effort with the outcome.
Or like say, like what you've used, celebrating mission and vision of the company.
Celebrating mission vision is more of, it's like reflecting or refreshing the why, right? As to why you are set out on that particular path. But I think knowing the why is even more important. Like before we were discussing about why this podcast, right? Right? And you want to kind of meet interesting people and understand their thought processes, right? That why is important, and then that's what you bring into the podcast, and that's how you kind of ask questions also. So for me, I need my motivations right. I can't be waking up at 9 or 8 in the morning and going to office because I have to go to office. I have to go to office because I'm building something fantastic, right? And I know what I'm building, and putting in that 1 hour is going to result in, say, that kind of an outcome for me.
Okay, so for me, just to maybe put my side of it, would be that for me, for example, the why of the podcast is not necessarily laid down on pen and paper. It's more that I enjoy it more than anything else that I do presently. And it is something that is not deterred by any kind of calamity or crisis or any kind of impediment that comes in the way. I would still like to do it.
So Naval Ravikant says this, right? If you enjoy what you do, then even doing it for 16 hours a day won't feel like work, right? The why is very clear in your case. You don't need to put it on pen and paper.
For you to ask me why you do it, I'll not have one reason. I will not have a succinct answer for you.
But you enjoy it, right? You enjoy meeting people through this medium.
Then enjoyment sounds very frivolous. He's enjoying it. It must be some pleasurable activity. It is not necessarily pleasurable for me to do this podcast because this is the most pleasurable part where I'm sitting with a guest and talking. Rest of it is just chaos and staying up for hours and not sleeping well, and life gets detracted. So the only pleasurable part is this, what we're doing right now.
It's good, right? It should not be continuous also. It's like when we were in college, we used to organize events. The process of organizing the events was very painful, but that one night when you used to get to attend the fest in the fan pit of sorts, right? That used to be the thing that used to feel, I think I can do this again. So I think that's important, right? Since you know where you're going to land. So I think, for example, I love problem solving. I found this to be one of the most meaningful problems which aligns with my skill sets.
So actually I've written down that I have identified you as a problem solver as well.
Okay.
Because from everything that I've learned about you, you look like an engineer in a management space.
Yes, I am actually that.
And are you like a nano level micromanager?
I believe that. So I'm not a micromanager, but I go into a lot of depth. So the way I work with my team is that I set up everything myself. And then I set up a kind of a feedback, report, review kind of a mechanism, and then I leave it. And then I only sync with my team once a week, or whatever the frequency needs to be in that case. I love to do things with a lot of depth.
So wait, when you say that you're setting up, does it mean that your team is observing you and they know what to do once you leave?
Yeah. So I set up with them. So for example, I know how a certain thing needs to look like or be like. So I'll work with them to set it up, create the document, create the process, execute the process a few times. Then I kind of give it to them. So first they shadow me for a week, then I shadow them for a week, and then I let it go.
Okay, so it's like a 2-week process.
It depends.
I mean, whatever, time period.
If it's a frequency, like for example, I have a sales team. So with them, I've seen that any process which I need to implement, I need to do it for a week. So within a week, 2-3 days of setting it up and 2 days of following with it is important. And then once a month, I have to just revisit it.
Okay. So say for example, you were setting up some process or like an Excel sheet or writing some formulas or whatever. And I was your intern or I was your lower line manager and I was observing you, shadowing you. What are some of the things that I need to be careful of, and what are the things that I need to be doing as a shadow?
Okay. So one thing is you have to document a bit and you have to write a lot. So when I was at True North in my private equity role, there I did not value it much initially, but then I was forced to do it, and eventually I figured out how valuable it was. I had to sit in meetings and create a lot of minutes and a lot of notes, right? That allowed me to understand the businesses while it was very tedious, and then I had to send it, and it felt as if somebody was asking me to report of sorts, right? But then I realized that the amount of context that I eventually had a few months later had put me in a position where I could control and command a lot of things. So I get my people to write a lot of stuff. Write because thinking is very different. Writing
On
is
pen and paper?
On pen and paper is very different because it kind of, you actually, when you write, right? I mean, a thought can be very complex. It comes kind of just becomes one line thought, right? Of sorts. And then obviously there are follow-ups to be done. There are things to be built and so on and so forth. So writing is one of the key things that I do require. Second thing, and that's not unfair on my part, but if you're working in a startup with the founder very closely, it does come as part and parcel. For me, this is my life, and this is my life, right? My day and night goes into my company. I don't really expect it, but then working hours, or I would say responsibility hours, do go beyond working hours. Or for example, for me, weekdays, weekends don't exist. Something is coming up at 11 in the night, I have to respond or answer.
But that's also because you're the CEO.
I am the founder, I would say, right?
And that may not necessarily be true for your accountant.
Not for my accountant, for my people, right?
It's a life you have chosen.
It's a life that I have chosen. But people who are, like for example, some of the people who I have as a part of my founder's office, I have made it very clear of the role that you've signed up for. And you need to know why you're here.
You're in the trenches.
You're in the trenches, and then you are expected to kind of follow the same work ethic.
Yeah.
I'm happy that I found such people. But I do see that sometimes there are other people who I cannot expect that from. So if you are of that mindset that you want to kind of...
Is here the 80-20 rule applies?
Of what?
Like only 20% of the people are committed to that level that the founder is?
Yeah. Yes, and it's natural also. Yeah. By the way, 80-20 chaos, but I think it will be like 98-2.
98-2.
2 is me.
Okay.
Very rare. I mean, I remember the first few people that I had in the company, they were from my network. I think they were as motivated as me, or even more. There was one guy who was way more motivated than me also.
So it's you, Soumya, and Harshal.
Himanshu.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. So these three are like...
3 of us are there.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so one more thing. Now that we've covered know the why, the other topic was first principles thinking.
Yeah.
And this is you've written on your website also that you're looking for people who apply first principles thinking. Could you perhaps explain to me what is first principles thinking and why do you choose people who apply first principles thinking?
Okay.
And why is it so important to you?
School maybe they used to focus a lot on getting your basics very clear, right? It never made sense for a very long time. Then IIT happened. I remember even cracking IIT was most of the questions that I had to just crack, right? I mean, if you effectively see, I just had to get 50% marks to get into an IIT. I had to just get 30% marks to get into an IIM. I just needed to get the right scores in place, right? And then I had to solve the right questions to be able to get there. And most problems in life have a very simple answer to them, right? For example, if there is a customer who's not happy with us, you ask them why you're not happy, because the person did not message me on time. I messaged him, I was expecting him
to get
back to me like 2 minutes ho gaye, 3 minutes ho gaye, did not get a response, right? Problems are generally problems are also simple. The solutions are also even simpler for us to solve them, right? Life is not really very complicated if you want to solve it. It's generally complicated if you don't want to solve it. And you're delaying the process of solving it. So I have seen that the most obvious answer is generally the right answer as well in a lot of cases. And it all gets solved with first principles. When you start thinking as to how something happens,
like the
fundamentals of that thing, right? For example, if I am going and buying a coffee and I don't like the coffee, right? And I write a scathing review on Google or whatever, and then whatever, bahut sara halla hota hai and bagara hota hai, right? Solving it by first principle is key. Either the coffee was not good, or the packaging was not good, or the delivery was not good.
Service was not good,
right? That's it. You just kind of ask the 3 questions and you see where the problem actually happened. Connect with the customer, speak to them, understand. And all problems get solved using first principles itself. So That's a thing which people,
You find it missing?
I find it missing. I find initiative missing, by the way, to solve first principles, because people have not really experienced first principles in normal life, right? Our academics don't really prepare us for that.
Like, could you, like a synonym could be common sense?
Common sense is a very broad term, by the way. It also encompasses awareness a lot into it, right? First principles is not just awareness. So first principle plus awareness would be equal to common sense, maybe.
Okay.
In a lot of ways, right?
Okay.
Common sense is just being aware of your surroundings as well, right? But yeah, I think common sense is a good term to use for this.
Okay.
Most people lack that. And common sense comes through experience, by the way. You're not born with it.
Yeah.
Just comes through experiences and how many experiences you gather. So,
Okay. So,
does that help you with that first principle, Tola?
Yeah,
answer, no?
it answers the question.
Okay.
Okay. So, a big part of your job is risk analysis.
Right.
And you've mentioned somewhere that your job is to be paranoid about risk.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll get to the paranoia and how you deal with that later. But first, I was very interested because you said that you developed 2 proprietary scoring methods. One for the application. I could be misquoting you. Application scoring and behavioral scoring.
Right.
Okay. Could you maybe, without getting into the whatever sensitive areas of the actual technology, could you just like give me a broad strokes of what the scoring method looks like and how does it differentiate between application scoring and behavioral scoring? Because I would think that behavioral scoring would be more qualitative than quantitative. Like, I mean, that's what I would, as a layman, would think of.
Okay. I'll take a very, I'll kind of use a more simpler kind of an example. Imagine you're getting a loan, right? You take a 1 lakh rupee personal loan. So what does the bank do? They'll ask you for certain documents. They'll check your CIBIL score. They'll see what existing loans, what existing assets, and how your bank account saving trends have been like. Right? And using that data, they will score it, and they'll say, "Hey, we can do 1 lakh for 12% for say a year's period." Right? You take the loan. Now what happens is you do your monthly repayments, and the loan say closes in a 1 year period. Or let's say 6 months later, you require 5 lakhs.
Okay.
Right?
Within the same time frame.
In the same time frame or even afterwards.
Okay.
I'm just taking one example. Let's say you require 5 lakhs after 6 months. Right? So you go to the same bank, you say, hey, I want to get a top up of 5 lakhs more. So what they will do, they will check your, again, the same parameters, bank, CIBIL score, so on, so forth, so on, so forth. And then what they'll also then see is this loan.
How has the behavior been?
How have you paid for it?
Right.
Did you pay for it on the due date, before the due date, after the due date? Are there any bounces which have happened? Are there any bank account or say balance issues which have happened? Have you delayed say 30 days, 90 days, 60 days and so on and so forth? That they will factor into the loan scoring as well. So the first one was application scoring at the application level. And the second one was behavioral scoring through the repayment cycles. So in our case, what we do is we evaluate the company from at an application level when they are applying with us, and when they kind of serve the tenure. So we give them say a 50 lakh rupee limit from our side. Once they start making the repayments, and we start seeing as to are they making on time, before time, after time. On that basis,
this you're talking about invoice discounting.
Invoice discounting, asset leasing are proprietary products as well. Okay. So then we kind of scale up or scale down their limits. So that's how these two things work.
Okay, and the behavioral scoring?
So behavioral was the behavior of the loan.
Okay, so one is at the application level when they have applied, what is their past has been like, and now their current, does it like tally with their?
Yes.
Okay, and the scoring system was designed personally by you?
Yes. I had built a few systems like this in the past.
In the past for a bank also?
So for a bank, and for a bank I was even working in data science in my early days, right after college. So I had that exposure in place. So I used that. Also, one of my investors was the chief risk officer of the bank where I was working. Okay. So he became an investor in the company eventually. And I kind of used his guidance to kind of build the scoring.
So when you're analyzing risk for a certain, I mean, we're talking very specific about a company applying for a certain credit limit or whatever.
Yeah.
But generally, what are the priorities? What are you looking at? What are the top 3 or 5 factors that you're looking at?
So we look at a few ratios. Which
Also,
kind of shows...
some of the things that are perhaps unnoticed but are actually rather very crucial.
So we kind of look into some of the standard things I'll talk about first. I'll have to think as to what are something...
Because as I understand, there must be some regulatory things that you must be doing, but also some internal processes that must be happening alongside those regulatory components.
So, we look at, by the way, so from a regulation standpoint, there are no norms to how do you evaluate a company, right?
Okay.
You get to know a lot by just looking at some of the financial metrics. Like you look at what kind of debt service coverage ratios are there, right? How are their cash flow cycles looking like compared to the industry? Because you know what industry cash flow cycles are and what their cash flow cycles are, and it shows the depth of their relationships with the companies or their clients and suppliers, right? The creditors. So those ratios are quite standard. So you can just look at those numbers. You can kind of configure the algorithm accordingly and the logics accordingly, and get a score out of it. What we have also factored in, and which I feel is very, very critical, and some very good players do it. We are not the only ones who do it. We factor in corporate governance a lot. Like for example, are there changes to the board which are happening and with what frequency? Are they doing their filings on time? Right? It shows their attitude towards compliances. Right? You can see their GST filings. You can look at their PF, TDS, etc. filings. You can look at the penalty that they're racking up. You can look at board level changes, the director changes that happen, equity changes which are happening. I think scoring all of these and bringing them into a place allows us to see and find stability. Like we are able to figure out how stable the management is, or how good the company is from a fundamental perspective. Are the people right who are behind the business, right? So the governance is a very big angle which comes into factoring in company and credit lines that way. So that's something that we kind of actively do.
Okay. So now on the topic of risk analysis, you said that your job is to be paranoid about risk assessment. It's one of the fundamentals, like one of the core job. How do you deal with paranoia? What kind of shields or checks and balances you've created for you as at the top of the pyramid to be cool and calm, and or do you lose it once in a while, or how does it happen?
Lot of questions,
but on the same thing.
Remind me if I miss something, because all of these are important questions, right? And I think if there is someone who's looking to run their own thing, not as a startup, even a company, right? It's important for everyone. My uncle, he's also a businessman. He told me something which really stuck with me and has worked for me as well. He told me to dream the biggest and then imagine kya fat sakta hai, and then fix those. And then
like a pessimist.
No. You're optimistic and pessimistic. You have to keep balancing between the two, right? And you kind of dream as big, and then you kind of start solving for the problems after that, right? Even if you look at some of the interviews, say someone like an Elon Musk, right? Running so many companies, he only solves one problem a week for his companies as well, right? So that approach has allowed us to strengthen in a lot of processes. Think about because you can always plan for the good, right? But actually planning for the bad is what you have to kind of master and be able to kind of attack those situations and solve for them in the best possible way. Just thinking that only good is going to happen is not real, right? You always have to understand what are going to be the negatives of a particular situation, because it's going to derail you emotionally, physically, spiritually, everywhere, right? So you need to kind of be well prepared when those situation comes in.
So how do you prepare?
We imagine what all could happen, and then we start covering for those. Like for example, us setting up a risk function in the beginning, or us setting up right type of compliances, meeting with those is the way we kind of chart everything down. कि आज क्या फट सकता है और फिर उसके ऊपर में काम करना शुरू करो. We getting, for example, legal opinions on a lot of our products and offerings, right? Because some of the products are in the unlisted space as well. So we kind of work that, we kind of imagine what worst could happen, prepare for it, make it airtight, and be ready, right? In case if anything could happen in that way. Second thing is, it actually allows us to strengthen in a lot of our own systems. Like there are certain things that we did not imagine would be happening, right? And they've never happened as well. But we just built the systems which potentially might be avoiding us for that to happen for us, right? In all of this, what I've realized is that I cannot show what's going inside me to my people because they will never be able to have full context on what I'm going through, right? And I have to exercise a lot of emotional restraint in front of my people, end of the day, because they are looking up to me rather than, I mean, I cannot
You can't be freaking out in front of your
I cannot be
manager.
freaking out in front of them or in front of my investors or anyone of that kind, right? They are the ones who are actually looking up to me in case something like that happens. But meri bhi fatti hai. I also have my moments and all, right? And I'm very glad that I have co-founders along with me, right? Who I share everything with, and we kind of come onto the same mental wavelength as well. So they act as sounding boards. Sometimes I also realize that I don't need to share all the time with them. I do share everything, but not all the time. Sometimes they need me as well, right? It's kind of a balance of sorts. So there are times when I have to kind of strengthen myself up. So for me personally, writing helps because those large problems in my head become small when I just write it down on a half piece of paper. And that allows me to regulate myself emotionally a lot. It's all about emotions.
Okay, so coming to journal, maintaining a journal or writing a journal, I know that you prefer sometimes to like take a screen break by like writing down on your with a pen and paper.
Yeah.
One of the things that I have also started doing when this podcast started was started using a note and a diary and pen to start noting all my thoughts and trying to make sense of them. But I find that my brain works very differently when I'm using pen and paper vis-a-vis when I'm typing. So that is one thing, and I don't know if you've experienced that. And the other thing is that once I've used a pen and paper to like say like, okay, this is the kind of topic I want to talk to Nischay about, or this is something that I should be worried about, or this is something I should not be bringing up, or whatever. I find that very hard to then translate it onto a digital medium. Like once it's written on pen and paper, then I find it very administrative to again now open the laptop, and because eventually I need to write that down. वो जो होता है ना कि rough and fair.
Correct.
वो करना बड़ा मुश्किल हो जाता है कि अब इसको rough तो कर लिया, अब इसको fair करना पड़ेगा. So is that something that and because of that I have now like my usage of diary and pen and paper has reduced drastically because even though I don't prefer it, I still type on the laptop. Is it something that you also go through, or how do you write so that it is easier for you to then translate into the digital medium?
So I use digital mediums to send stuff to people. Like when I write a set of series of action items and I send it. But generally I'll have a version of it on my paper and then I write it over there as well.
So you'd go through that process?
I go through that process, and I think I've just weaved the process into my life now. I'm now not able to write directly on a system, by the way. Okay. But I think I have a reason for myself. I don't know what's it for other people or for you. But for me, I think my sociological conditioning has been that हम लोग बचपन से we used to write.
लिख के
करते थे, लिख के learn करते थे, या लिख के solve करते थे, और लिख के ही चीजें करते थे. Right? When I write, I just feel comfortable. I feel safe. I feel like this is the way to solve it, right? I think because of my sociological conditioning or my
background,
bachpan, this is a process which is natural to me, right? Now there could be newer generations who are doing this on a system or a screen, and they may find that comfortable, right? And it could see that shift in from a pen paper to that. But for me, I know this is the most natural thing for me to do. I know end of the day I just have to write, right? And writing is very ingrained into हमारे बचपन से लोग लिखते थे हर चीज, right? We didn't have laptops or phones and screens and all that. So okay. So do you want to take a break? I'm good.
Okay, great. Okay, so how is it faring so far? By the way, are you comfortable?
मेरा तो comfortable है. How do you think it's?
Yeah, it's great. Okay, so Now let's jump to a topic that I think I've read, you've spoken about, you've written about, is skillability.
Scalability. Huh?
You mentioned it somewhere, and you said that like having the necessary adequate skills is very important, and being in the entrepreneurial space or whatever. So my question is, what's the most useful skill you've ever learned in your life that has actually been you're applying it?
What's the most useful skill? I think so there are 2-3 things which are there, and I kind of see them as a roll up of sorts together. First thing is learnability, a lot. Being able to learn, or the curiosity to learn, or continuously being on a learning curve, and knowing that you don't know everything. That's a very important first. I would say, suppose साथ में आएगा, लेकिन the first dimension of that is learnability. Second is every damn person has something to share. Okay, मतलब I have learned how to peel a mausambi from a juice wala. Okay, and I saw what the most optimal way to do that is, right? And I found that very interesting. So being interested to know what everyone has, because your people are lifetimes of experience in them, right? Like 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, and in one conversation, if you can get that, that's one of the greatest things that you can do. And the third thing is to kind of being able to start from scratch, like always going back to zero and starting, right? That's these 3 things kind of play with each other a lot. So whenever you're wanting to do something, or say for example some things go to shit, you have to kind of be able to go back to the drawing board and start again and do it again, right? So these 3 things, I think they go in together as a roll up, and I think it's the biggest weapon I have for myself. Learnability, learning from people, and being able to go 0 to 1. Being able to go to 0 and then again to 1. That's important.
So when I guess you're talking about rethinking in a sense, maybe like does it happen sometimes that you're convinced about a certain way of doing something, and then you have to rethink and go back to the drawing board and say,
yes. Oh, that's a very difficult thing to do. That's a very difficult thing for people generally to do, and because you've already invested so much time and effort into it, and admitting that you're wrong and going back and then figuring it out again. Go figure is one of my core principles.
Okay.
So that's rare, by the way. I found it to be surprisingly rare
in people.
In people, yes.
So how do you convince yourself that whatever I was thinking was terribly wrong and I need to go back?
Okay, I start with that. I always start with I'm wrong. In a particular, say whatever I'm doing, I say I'm wrong, but let me try this and see if it works, right?
Sometimes you have to apologize for that as well.
Oh yeah, I apologize a lot. Later I thought I apologize. So apology though is nothing. I mean, it's important if I change things, then it's worth the apology, right? But being able to go back to 0, right, and scrapping whatever you've done, that's a difficult thing to do. A very difficult thing to do, and you have to sometimes apologize if it comes at another person's cost. If it's your time and cost, then apologize.
You have to apologize to yourself. Forgive yourself then.
You have to forgive yourself more than apologize.
Okay. So, do you think decisiveness is overrated then?
Decisiveness is overrated.
Because I've heard you talk about what is that? Taking decisions with an iron fist sometimes.
Yeah. Okay, in that context, people have opinions, and everyone has opinions all the time, and sometimes you need to move forward. Otherwise, you can keep evaluating, and things can die there, right? And you have to move forward, and then you have to take a decision with an.
So you have to move forward, knowing fully well that you could be terribly wrong about this.
Yes. So that is something that see, as a startup, this is in the context of a startup, right? As a startup, you are operating on a runway, right? Yeah. Till the time things take off and they are they are there, you can self-sustain and so on and so forth. So you're running on a runway, you have to be decisive, you have to take decisions and move forward. 4 people can have 4 differing opinions, but as a leader, then you have to kind of take a decision, and sometimes you have to disagree and commit as well, right, to move forward.
Okay.
But it's important to move forward, otherwise you will be stuck in a loop.
Do you have to sometimes also cave into their opinions?
Yes, I have to. So there, generally what happens is, it depends upon what our dominions are. Like for example, if with Himanshu, he is taking a certain technology decision of sorts, or say if Soumya is taking a business decision of sorts, which is in her domain and she is responsible for it, I don't agree with it, I don't agree with what Himanshu does, I have to kind of let it go and then see how it plays out. So then my responsibility comes as to, if things start breaking, then I have to help in fixing it.
Then you have to come plug it.
It's like how I've treated my sister, right? Ki you do whatever, and जिस दिन देखो कुछ problem होगी तब मुझे call लगा देना. I'll be there. I don't agree with your method, but you can call me. So it's just like that. So that's how you have to sometimes cave in.
So I guess like यहाँ पे थोड़ा बहुत एक ownership mentality का भी concept आ जाएगा, because you need people who.
That's good actually, and I love it, by the way, if I have fights with people, right? If I have a fight with a person who's reporting
like
to me,
you're saying like a real fight like full on
aggression होता है, like meeting में disagreements होते हैं and so on and so forth. After the meeting, like in that meeting or after that meeting, there is obviously sometimes that adrenaline of sorts, right? But there's also this thought of self-respect, like not self-respect, a respect for the other person, which comes in कि he or she stood their ground. तो वो मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगता है. I love it. Like some of my best friends I've had fights with, right? And those relationships are more tighter today.
Now.
That's something which I really, really respect at work. So if somebody were to, that one question, were to work with me, I love it when somebody fights with me. I'll possibly be fighting and you'll not love it. But back of the mind, I kind of am like, yeah, at least this person
is brave enough to talk to me. And
actually, they're brave enough to voice their opinion and even question me as well. I really love it because I feel like they're standing their ground. And I can also be wrong. And they're kind of showing me why I can be wrong. So that's important.
Okay, so you said somewhere that I'm quoting you a lot, but you said somewhere that non-monetary incentives are one of the key ways you can inculcate, you can nurture a ownership culture in your company. So, what are some of these non-monetary incentives that you look at, and how do you generally cultivate a culture where people are standing their ground and taking their own decisions and fighting with you a lot?
So, for a very efficient organization to exist, it will have to have very smart people who are communicating and sharing everything with each other, right? And for anybody to share anything with anyone, they need to have a safe space, especially with their manager, their bosses, their founders, right? If a safe space does not exist, communication will break down, and then it will be very authoritarian and it will go top down or bottoms up or whatever. Right? Not haywire, but it will be very unilateral, and then you will need more execution people in your company. To create the safe space, you see there is monetary as an angle. The safe space is more relationship driven, right? Where how do you bring in those angles of which don't feel like a transaction into life, right? I've worked very passionately on a few things in life with friends, right? And some of them were not even friends, but they became friends, and we continue to remain friends and continue to contribute to each other's journeys as well. I think that element of relationship is very important. So one of the non-monetary things which I do, right? I sometimes call some team members of mine home and I cook breakfast for them. Right? Nothing. And literally on a weekday, by the way. So on the work, before work, so 9 o'clock or 8:30, they'll come down. I'll make some akuri or something, some toast and all. And that's it. That small little moment that they share with us is something which they feel very proud of it. They love to talk about it with other people in the company. And then other people start putting in the effort to kind of become closer to us, right? They also are very free to talk to us about कि मुझे इस दिन की छुट्टी चाहिए या आज मुझे ये करना है या ये प्रॉब्लम हो रही है within the company, how do we solve it, and so on and so forth. So I think those barriers start breaking down, and the safe space emerges because of those non-monetary incentives, those softer incentives of sorts, right, that we start creating. So,
but see, inculcating a friendship with or a informal interaction with somebody is perhaps, you can do it at your own local level, like at your own personal level. But at the corporate level, when the HR department starts doing these things, or like when they say, okay, invite your parents on a Friday or whatever, XYZ, or all these activities that happen, they end up being a little vacuous.
Yeah, they do. So that again, it boils down to intent, right? HR is doing because, I mean, it kind of gets a little broken of sorts from an intent perspective as to why something is happening, right? So we, for example, in my company, we crowdsource these ideas. And rather, so HR is, we have an HR team, but they only do the operational process stuff. Salary or even some of the stuff like कुछ चीजों का organizing and all में वो help कर देते हैं. So generally we have people themselves becoming, say, we had a stepathon recently, right, in the office, and we just put up a poll. I just put up a poll, and folks kind of just said, hey, let's do this. There were like some volunteers who came up.
Is this the one where you were circling around?
Circling around in Instagram story, you would have seen that, right? Yeah. So people went mad in that, right? And it was something which people themselves took initiative for. Abhi recently, HR is organizing a cricket match, right? And then that cricket match के captains कर रहे थे, but we saw कि cricket match कितना enthu हो नहीं रहा है, ठीक है? This Secret Santa happened, and one of the folks got a Nerf gun, a series of Nerf guns. Then the idea has now started floating, why don't we do a competition on Nerf guns? We'll create the same teams, but let's not do cricket. Let's do like a paintball, but using Nerf guns. And this crowdsourcing of ideas, right, from people and just listening to them, now that's kind of allowing us to create that vibe of sorts in a company. So we kind of keep listening to the people itself and try to kind of push the boundary of traditional understandings of how some functions are supposed to be like.
So in this connection, I wanted to talk to you about actually scaling simplicity. For example, like you said that you're going to invite your people for breakfast, but and now you're, I think, 30-40 people? 70 people. Oh, that's amazing. Maybe in the future when you grow and expand, it'll not, your house will probably fall short for so many people coming in, or whatever, a number of managers coming in. At that level, corporatization will happen, where you'll probably have to look at other ways of creating that same environment. In that, I wanted to talk to you about, you said that one of the priorities with an investment or with an alt investment space is the simplicity of the product that needs to be communicated. The communications have to be simplified, and like you said that people don't understand what IRR is or XIRR is or whatever, so it becomes very difficult for you to communicate. As your product range increases, I think now you're operating on 2 or 3 products, if I'm not wrong. I spoke to Bhumika, by the way, yesterday, and she was telling me that they've only done 1 product now. Okay. So, invoice discounting, but which in itself took me a long while to understand what invoice discounting. I had to watch a couple of videos on your website. But as the product range grows, and I'm sure these investment products are very complicated, how do you plan on charting out this simplified communication process? Or how is there a structure in your mind that you're looking at it as a problem that, okay, I need to break this down into its fundamental concepts and communicate that?
So there's a simplicity wala part of the product offering, then how are we moving forward, and then there's a piece of how do we kind of bring this kind of breakfast to
the breakfast culture into a bigger
larger thing. See, I think I would want to grow first and then figure out how to solve it. Right now I just need to call 4-5 of the managers, right? And it's not as if I make an event out of it. I just call like 3 people, 5 people. Sometimes we also have something known as a Thursday night as well, wherein say another 10-15 people do come in, but it's open to all. Everybody knows about it as well, right? So I think when we'll scale, we'll grow. We'll figure out as to how do we do it. I am trying to build my first line of command of sorts, and I am expecting that they will carry the culture forward as well. So I need to do it for the first 100. The 100 will do it for the next 1,000, and then so on and so forth.
Makes sense.
Steve Jobs had this thing where he used to take his top 100 folks to a resort and I think they used to have a strategy sessions and all, and they used to define the strategy of Apple in that thing. So I think if that can go there, then I can. I'm sure. I think I can also. I have the confidence that ho jayega when I get to the bridge, we'll cross it. So coming to the simplicity part, right now. We have multiple offerings also, but it's on the Ultra application.
Of course.
And our certain licenses are underway. So the licensed product will be separate, and these products are into a separate thing with a proper wealth layer and everything of sorts. Now, products, invoice accounting, by the way, if you look at, just let's take this particular product, right? If you look at any of our competitor websites or platforms, right? We are currently targeting those innovator people, early adopters in the segment, right? Now they are exposed to how the product is there on other platforms, and then they come onto our platform and see the product also. As of now, I need to solve for simplicity for this customer against the layer of this competition, right? So I need to know the context of simplification. I cannot oversimplify it, and I don't want retail investors, by the way. I don't want people who are, say, I'm targeting people above the 30 lakh income bracket. I do not want people in the 10 to 15 lakh income bracket as of now, because they'll not understand the product and the risks which are involved in it, right? So purposefully, we are keeping the product complicated enough to not attract them, but simplified enough against the backdrop of those competitors.
It's
a very thin line. It's not a thin line actually. It's actually easy for us to figure out. We just need to know if they've invested in any of the other platforms.
Okay.
Once we know that they've invested through one of the platforms, we know that
this works and this doesn't.
So we kind of just make it simpler enough from the rest of the market, and not too simple also, because the cost of novelty, right? I do not want things to become so different that people have a hard time or they don't become too comfortable with it.
Like it should be still associated with the entire product range or the bracket.
It should seem like it, but simpler and easier to use. But not too different. If it's too different, then learning ek alag se humko karni padegi. That's why. Now, for example, one of the products that we had launched, and it was a very simplified product, which was like, you just invest, you'll get 11%. And you don't need to think as to
where it is going.
Because it's already a basket. We're working with an NBFC to create that basket. But we saw that
like a basket of different assets?
A basket of different assets altogether, right? And structured through an NBFC route, created a PTC out of it, put it on the platform. But it was so new that people had a hard time understanding it, and they did not have a reference point in the market to kind of peg it against. So you have to have a reference point also to be able to create some innovation on it. So not too different.
Okay, that's very interesting. But at the execution level then, are you like taking help of, say, videos, photos, infographics? What is the easiest way to explain a complicated problem to somebody?
Visual. It is a visual, and we do...
Like I've watched you explain it.
So why do I explain it? Because they want the founder to
let me point out that in that video, I was expecting infographics to pop around you, which it didn't, you just give like a piece to camera.
Correct.
So, but because I think the way you explain it so easily, I could understand. But I was wondering that why is there no infographic? Why is there no like...
We actually missed putting the infographic. So we actually made the videos with Tap, but the Ultra is about to be launched. So we've redone the videos for Ultra and put the infographics over there.
Okay, great.
Right. So visuals helps the most. Founders promoters have to be put out there, right? Because trust comes through them. So we have to kind of work with both of them. And but we have to try also, by the way. So we're doing webinars, we're doing infographics, we're doing visuals, we're doing videos. We are sending them material, we are explaining to them on a phone call, we're sending them photographs on WhatsApp. We're seeing which one works. And we continue to kind of keep experimenting on this.
And which do you think works? Because one thing is shooting a video and creating it, the other is distribution. I need to convince somebody to watch this 2-minute video of a product that he has not probably seen ever before, and they need to watch that video. So which medium do you think works best?
Again, trialing as a medium, right? Trialing as a medium is the best one. If I can just give them a 1,000 rupee product, right? say I give them the 1,000 rupee investment, which I can't do right now, but once so in the listed bond side, right, the offering is of 1,000 rupees.
I think it's 500 rupees on Tap Invest.
No, it's 50,000 rupees on Tap Invest.
Okay.
You can invest in gold and all for 500, but we have digital gold as well.
Oh, you're saying the minimum
investment, right?
That is 10,000 on Tap Invest?
No, it's 50,000.
50,000.
Okay. It's 50,000. But there is another Tap Bonds which is coming up, and there my ticket size I can drop it to 1,000 or sub 1,000 as well.
Achha, what is the reason for you to... I'm sorry, I'm like cutting you off, but what is the reason for you to create these three different applications?
A regulation. So the regulation says that a brand which is running a listed business cannot have the same brand as the unlisted business. So you'll have to create two separate brands. So I'll have only two brands, by the way. So Tap Invest and Tap Bonds are one and the same. Tap is the name over there, and then Ultra is the name for my other product offerings.
So the HNI.
Yes. Tap Capital is the NBFC side of things which Soumya runs.
Okay.
So that's a separate thing altogether.
Okay. So since we're talking about all these, now we're getting into the weeds of it. You used a very interesting term, which was regret minimization. For example, I'm looking at an investment into the company, a ERP or any kind of software or something, which is for example, for this podcast. Now I'm facing the challenge of making it into a video thing. I'm looking at a large investment in terms of the number of cameras I need, and I'm looking at Amazon and I'm saying, oh, this is like way out of my pocket. But I know that the promise of that investment is in the future. So when you're faced with such crucial, expensive investments, how do you minimize your regret when making the final decision?
So I picked up regret minimization from, I think Jeff Bezos talks about it a lot in decision making.
Okay.
And is it Jeff Bezos or someone from, I think, Anderson Horowitz or someone? Anderson Horowitz. One of the two. But the way I look at regret minimization is that I'm actually excited about the two prospects or the three prospects, and I'm not able to decide which is more exciting, right? And then I kind of start focusing on as to ये नहीं करूँगा तो कितना regret होगा, ये नहीं करूँगा तो कितना regret होगा, ये नहीं करूँगा तो कितना regret होगा. Merely this, by the way, comes a lot, by the way, in my personal life rather than the work. Work में it allows me, my mission vision allows me to kind of pick and choose the right thing very fast, right? It's obviously, for example, something like a podcast or say SEO, when I'm investing into these things, these are more long-term oriented methods of marketing for myself. So I'm just kind of budgeting appropriately for it. And I took the decision of the podcast also in this way for me to do it.
This is your own podcast you're talking
my own podcast.
That's Soumya hosts.
Correct.
Yeah.
If I don't do it, then what's the negative value of it, right? In between, we were even considering should we kind of do it in a season kind of a format, or should we do it continuously? We decided to go with continuously because we are like, this is the most optimal way for me to do my marketing, by the way.
Exactly.
Like my entire marketing is now podcasts. Entirely. And from a cost point of view, by the way, it works out the best for me. Because creating that content and social media posts and all, there's not much innovation I can do there, right? But it works more in my personal life. Right? Like, for example, if there's this one trip I want to do, or this one particular car I want to buy and all, right? And then I'll be like, what will happen if I don't buy it? If I don't go on that trip?
Okay, so that's the first question you ask.
Then I'm like, okay, I think, I come to the question that your life is so short and small that you should kind of chase that experience that you have and then you work towards it. Like, for example, I have a goal towards a specific car in my mind. And being a venture funded company, this is one place where I can have a limited income from because I am answerable to investors and so on and so forth. So now I'm also having this thought as to how can I create additional income streams for myself, right? And that's kind of allowing me to push the boundaries. So I'm contributing in the family business, I'm kind of helping another friend out, I'm kind of setting my own thing up on a consultation basis as well on the side, right? So
consultation for coffee or something?
On the coffee side. So there are some few things here and there which I'm kind of doing just to kind of push the boundaries and kind of figure out what could be a way for me to minimize that regret. End of the day, and that I love that challenge.
But what if the temptation lies equally in both the choices? Say, for example,
I try to make it happen for both. So my method of regret minimization is to kind of, how can I figure out both? And but then the question is when also. So then which one would I want first as well, right? So I'm not able to recall an example on this right now.
For example, say for example, purchasing a camera. For me, it's a big investment because it's lakh or whatever. Now, I don't know how this podcast is going to fare 1 year or 2 years down the line. For me to make that purchase right now is a big investment because I'll be paying out of my pocket. I'll not want my company or my parents to pay for it. So like you, I'll be looking into, chalo main kuch aur paid projects kar leta hu. I should get some, I should start working for some of my friends, help my sister or whatever, get some money out of it. But that is me trying to arrange for that thing to happen or not happen. But at the end of the day, I want that. I'm not sure still that even if I go ahead, it will be fruitful or not.
I go for it. So the thing is, not going for it is leaving
the bigger regret.
Is a bigger regret, right? I don't know. Like for example, in this case, I would figure out if can I go down the personal loan route of sorts, or some like a consumer loan just hota, right? I'll pace it out over a 6-month period and see if I can figure it out to pay, right? Or I'll figure out as to can I kind of get it on rent, or can I get it from a friend, or can I kind of just loan it from someone, right? You have to go for it. I mean, for me, I'll figure it out some way or the other. There are, I can remember of some cases where there have been some people that I've had to, they are leaving and I'm trying to retain them, but then I have to be like, I think let it go now. So I think there is where, but that's not regret minimization, by the way, for me. Now if I think about it, I could not have done anything about it. But motivation shift ho jata hai to shift ho gaya, right? I don't think I've actively come across some regret minimization. But regret minimization, mera to ye 0-1 decision hai. It's very binary for me. Okay. I have to kind of, otherwise I just let go of it. Then I kind of shut that chapter so that I don't think about it again. You have to move very fast. Because there's going to be another problem which is going to come after that. So it's better to keep solving problems and having some movement in place. So you'll come with another problem. You get the camera. You'll have another problem after that. Then you'll be like, oh, what if I can get a nice boom mic? Now light.
Okay. So I have to dive in, I guess.
You have to dive in. You have more problems waiting for you.
Okay, so you good on time, na?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. I'm just checking ki kahan jana chahiye iske baad. What is the influence of Professor Sunil Handa on your life?
Sunil Handa was took a guest lecture for us in a course, forgetting the course's name, but it was a course on education, and he comes from the education space.
He has a school, I think.
He has a school called Eklavya
this is in Ahmedabad.
The school is also in Ahmedabad, and Professor Handa also runs one of the largest companies in the IV hota hai na, saline bags and all. So in that space, and he's an IMA grad and who worked very closely with Varghese Kurian from Amul. And then he kind of started his own thing. That Amul ka jo collective jo shuru hua tha.
Yes.
And one, he is a very inspiring person himself, and he's made a lot of money for himself as well. He's been quite successful that way. But I remember this one lecture in which the amount of he was bringing a lot of passion into the class and the way he was speaking, right? He said one thing which was very raw and real for me. He said that whatever I do, whatever I build,
I think whether it is going to save my mother's life
or not, right? And if this is the thing which is going to be the decision making between this and that, so so for example, he gave examples of certain ingredient ka choice karna tha. The cost, one ingredient's cost was lower, one was a little bit higher. But then he asked himself, would
you serve that to your
mother or not, right? And that allowed him to take a decision ki cost chodo, I'm going to focus on the quality itself. I mean, that decision making brings a lot of soul into things that you do in life, right? And that's where what kind of clicked with me ki jo Sunil Handa when he said that, right? And then I was also, by the way, I've been hunting for ideas for the longest time as to what do I do in life. And then when I came across these products like investments की space में मैंने debt में भी हम लोग ने वो जब हम when we're working in it, right, I'm actually thinking as to my mother is earning 5.5-6% on her FD portfolio. I have to build it for her, right? And that kind of brings in a lot of emotion into my business for me, and it keeps me driven a lot as well. So that was what I took away from Sunil Handa. That inspiration I took from him. And how did it? And by the way, his school is fantastic. It's a very experiential school, and the pedagogy is very different.
Like it's an alternate education.
It's an alternate education system of sorts, and kids are farming, and this is a very, very, very different environment altogether. So I think it's only possible through passion, through that type of emotional connect and passion that he's bringing to that.
How did you arrive at this idea, by the way, in the alt investment space? Because Project 2.2 was continuing till 2020.
Still continues, by the way.
But I mean, in the sense like you were, actively pursuing it.
Yeah.
And then you get into True North. And then what happens in that 1 year, 4 months?
So Project 2.2 is just a blog. I continue to run it as a blog on the side. I do coffee kits. I'm starting to do some workshops also now. Okay. And I keep talking to a lot of entrepreneurs, VCs, etc. On the other side, I'm actually working with a few as well on that front. When I was at True North, I was exposed to... So by the way, when I went to True North, I was considering 8-10 years I'm going to be in the industry, not in True North, but I'm going to be in the industry.
Private equity space.
Private equity or whatever it could lead me to, right? And I'll take it, I'll want to gain experience, gain credibility, and then I'll start something of my own.
So did you know that 2.2 could not be your bread and butter?
Previously, I had run a startup in the education space called
Menti Club,
right? I was very passionate about the education space and about the mentoring space, I would say. And mixing my passion with money, I actually saw that when I was getting, say, disappointed by the feedback of that particular product from the market, right? People wanted mentoring for free. They didn't want to pay for it. That was a problem that I faced over there. It kind of pushed me away from that passion which I had for mentoring as a subject, right? And I'm very glad that I found a second passion in the space of coffee. Then I made it very clear I'm not going to make money here. Because I don't want to mix money making with a space like this. But I don't want to lose this passion. So I'll continue to do this as
so to protect your love for it, you decided not to.
Correct. I've done a few consulting gigs and all here and there.
But you don't rely on it.
I don't rely on it, and I don't even charge much for it, by the way. So I made sure that I'm not going to do anything because I'm designed that way. It's not something very global. It's only specific to me that I don't want to make my passion and profession as the same. So yeah, True North happened. I was working 80 hours a week over there, and it really put me through the grind.
Did it take a toll on your health also?
No, it did not. I think it was during COVID times, and I was in Bangalore, and I was able to figure out a good schedule for myself. I think starting up took a physical toll on me. In terms of I could not really... I have time, but not the mind space to focus on myself. Okay.
But because you were like a gym freak before
I used to be a gym freak, and it'll be hard to imagine, but I used to have abs and all at one point in time. But I was able to meld my work and life very well during True North days. So
you were enjoying your life.
Yeah, I was enjoying. But then...
And then you decided not to.
Then I decided not to. So, I remember Soumya and I, we were actually...
you met in college.
We met in college. I hope my parents don't see this, but we were living together as well in Bangalore. And before getting married and all. And I remember at nights, we were stuck in COVID, right? And I think wave 2 was quite crazy, quite scary.
So it's when the virus got stronger, I think.
Stronger, yes. So, confined to the homes, we used to sometimes sneak to the terrace of the building and walk there for hours at night. And that's where we got talking about what's next, right? Is this something that we would want to do? And then we started entertaining the idea that we could work together as well, because we were actually working together in the same home, right? In different workplaces, but working together. And that idea of what if, rather than giving 10 years to the industry, what if we give those 10 years to ourselves and maybe get there faster as well from an experience standpoint. And then we started hunting as to what are we both passionate about. And investments were something that we were both passionate about. I was exposed to crypto since 2014. I was doing a lot in the investment space here and there, and you mentioned about CIE as well, right? Same with Soumya. Soumya has been, she worked at City Markets. Even in McKinsey, she was working in the FS practice, the financial services practice a lot. Has built a very strong portfolio for herself over
She has
years.
more experience, I think, in the private equity space than you.
No. She's a fresher. She was a fresher, and she joined McKinsey in 2020 itself. Okay. So I think by now she has like 4 years of experience. Okay. I had like 3 plus now 4. So 3 more years of sorts. So both are. We started talking, started discussing, and then we started seeing as to what's the next opportunity to build. Investments में करना था. We saw equity में काफी लोग बना रहे हैं, debt में कोई नहीं बना रहा है. We also saw कि some of the West में like US, Europe, and then some countries like South Korea, right, Malaysia, they have very good bond markets or debt markets in place. That kind of inspired us कि hey, India में भी ये हो सकता है. And then we started hearing some chatter here there from the regulators and all. There are some things which are going to happen in this space as well to open up and come up with licenses. So we're like, let's build in this. It's like a green field. Nobody is here. Less people are here. If we start building and dedicating some time, I think we can build something meaningful of sorts. So we wanted to be in a less crowded space. And then we figured out that this has the potential to become a $1 billion entity. A multi-billion dollar entity for us. And that's how we ended up pitching and starting in this space.
And you knew from the beginning that you wanted to have a seed funding, and then you wanted to go the venture route.
Yeah.
There was never a conversation, let's keep it like a firm.
No. So we were thinking of whether we should keep it as a firm or that way. Now, to keep it as a firm, we would have had to have more experience and capital of our own to be able to start.
You would have taken a lot of capital
in the initial days, right? Just to even start your own portfolio or to manage a portfolio for someone else.
Makes sense.
We were like, so basically, it's like running on steroids of sorts, right? And we were like, we have access to that type of capital. We can raise that type of capital.
You have that kind of network.
We have that kind of network, and we kind of chose. We had to evaluate, by the way, a lot. Because it has its own cons also, by the way. So we had to evaluate a lot as to would we want to go down the VC route or not, right? It comes at the cost of a lot of freedoms, a lot of choices, a lot of...
I was going to come to that, yes.
But we made a conscious choice on that. And we said that we want to run in this direction.
Okay, so to that, the way pop culture or social media or whatever you've seen the movies... when I look at the VC route, like you said, you're running on steroids. I feel like to show this exponential growth or to chase that growth and that expansion comes off like a must. You need to expand, or you need to perhaps grow your product, your product range or whatever. Does the VC culture respect slow growth? Does it respect word of mouth publicity?
That's not the capital for, by the way. So you need to know first as to what VC money is for, and then you raise it. And then expecting that VC has to be patient is actually a very unfair ask to do. You go down the private equity route or the debt route if you want to have more slower capital in place, right? You should not be raising
money if
VC
you
capital, VC money, if you are expecting
slow.
a slow growth of sorts, right? You look at it from a VC lens, right? By the way, funds are different. So there are angel funds which are like early stages, and then a company can either go down the VC route or the PE route, right? A VC business is something which has to grow like say 2x, 3x year on year. A PE business would be say 30%, 40%.
PE is public.
Private equity. Private equity.
Okay.
So every company will raise capital or will kind of grow bootstrap to a certain level, and then either it may go public, it may sell, or it may sustain at a certain level, right? What you can say, if it will take you 10 years to build a company professionally and go public for it, it may require, say, at the 5th year, 7th year, private equity infusion, which means first 5 years you have to kind of get capital yourselves, right? VC, on the other hand, can allow you to do the same in a 5-year time span. It can allow you to get to the 10-year span which a PE takes in a 5-year time span.
5 or 7 years.
But then you will have to kind of give it a larger growth. If you look at funds, right? Funds, when they raise capital, it's generally a 8 to 10 year fund cycle, which includes a 1 year raising and a 2-year deployment. And then they have a 7-year period to grow the investments and then give exits. In this time span, they need to
But for that time period, you need to be patient.
You need to be patient, right? The funds need to be patient.
Yeah.
But what happens is, 2 in 10 startups are the ones who will end up surviving in a portfolio. 8 in 10 are going to go down. Which means the 2 in 10 will, or 1 in 10 will have to give the entire fund's returns. So the VC is under pressure to deliver that, say, over a 10-year period, it will be almost like a 15, how much? 30% is about 2xing on a 2-year basis or a 3-year basis. And you are effectively 8xing, 10xing the fund in a 10-year time span, right? So 8 years may 8x, 10 years may 10x is kind of roughly, I'm just giving some math, that you have to scale up. The VC is investing in, say, 10 companies. Only 2 are surviving. So the 2 now have to deliver the entire fund.
Compensate for the entire fund.
Compensate for the entire fund's 10x, which means they'll then have to give, say, 50x or 100x returns. Right?
For that average to go up.
For the average to go up to, say, 10x or 8x. Which means that all these and by the way, the fund, it doesn't happen कि आज 100 rupees की company है तो कल suddenly वो 10,000 rupees की हो जाएगी. It will go from 100 to 500 to 10,000 to 1,000 to 5,000 to 10,000, right? That's how it will grow. Which means every year or 2 years it will have to scale up in valuation also.
But the IRR will increase.
IRR का estimate कर लोगे. IRR मतलब IRR, they'll not look at it exactly from an IRR perspective on a year to year. Fund cycle pe they'll look at it from an IRR perspective. But the chase is then ki you have to double in valuation almost every year or every 2 years, right? That pressure, then by the way, they don't know which 2 are going to survive.
So they're going to be pressurizing everybody.
All the time. Right? And it's not the pressure, it's the fund's expectation. End of the day, and the raise of the capital that you're doing, right?
And it is what you signed up for.
It's what you signed up for. You need to know that if you're raising this capital, you're supposed to deliver that type of growth as well. And you're raising that capital for that type of growth. Otherwise, you raise another type of capital. Don't raise a VC capital. So we have to kind of
pull up your socks.
Pull up your socks, and then you've signed up for it, right? And you can't then be expecting, hey, I'm slow, so then let me be slow. That's not a fair kind of ask. VC is like rocket fuel, and they will expect that type of growth as
well. Okay. Can you explain to me what is willpower paradox?
What is the willpower paradox? I'm kind of...
You mentioned
it. Description.
I don't know. It's okay. Let's not go there if you don't know.
Willpower paradox.
You mentioned it somewhere that. So I was very curious. What is willpower paradox? Even I don't know. You mentioned I'm listening to too many podcasts, I think.
Okay. I would have quoted because it would have been fresh in my mind from somewhere.
Yeah, that's okay. Okay. So when we come to problem solving, before that, let's talk about a little bit about creativity. So I wanted to discuss creativity with you in contrast to regulations. Because I feel like, I've written here that fintech operates at the intersection of innovation and regulation.
Correct.
So how do you experiment while adhering to these regulations and this watchdogs looking at you?
See, this is a business or this is a space. Not just fintech. There are, I think, fintech may all the spaces from lending to insurance to payments to savings and wealth, right? 4 spaces exist करते हैं. In सब में innovation comes at a particular cost also, right? And what we need to do is that we've also seen how other companies and players are kind of working. What they do is when you're innovating, you take an existing example or a norm and you innovate to an extent that it doesn't cross a boundary of sorts. Okay? And by the way, you have the right type of legal experts in place, legal experts, compliance experts,
to help you not cross that
ex-regulators who will help you in not crossing.
But so much about innovation, isn't it about pushing that boundary or pushing?
It is. So, for example, in our case, SEBI is a very open regulator to discussions and innovations as well. There was a time when bunch of us, we came together, we created a paper and we submitted it to SEBI, and they created a regulation around it for the listed bond space, right? So we are quite happy. By the way, one of my key decision making criteria for investment as a space was the regulator is pro innovation.
Okay.
And they'll listen to you, and you will innovate, they'll create a few regulations around it, they'll create some consultation papers around it, and they'll allow you to kind of innovate also, right?
But at the end of the day, SEBI is thinking about the investor.
They're thinking about the investor, but SEBI is a very pro-innovation kind of a regulator per se. So you can push the boundaries of sorts. Some people, for example, in the crypto space, now this is something which I did not want to do. We have an option that we can domicile the business in another country as well, serving India, which would mean that I'll be able to push the boundaries of innovation a bit more.
Right? Would that mean that taxation will be different?
No. Even regulation will be different for me. Now, for example, I can do tokenization of these assets, like invoice discounting, asset leasing, any product. I can buy it at an entity level, create tokens against it, and people can invest in those tokens.
Like coins.
Like crypto, you can say.
Okay.
It can be structured as a crypto, but it's not volatile as crypto.
Okay.
Right? It will be fixed income 12%. For this, I'll have to then do it, say, in something like a Dubai or Hong Kong or Singapore.
Okay.
This is a choice that I had. But then I was like, in this space, I'm here for my life, right? I'm dedicating the next couple of decades to the space of fixed income. And I have to play by the rules of the regulator here. So then I have to kind of push the boundary enough that I'm able to kind of work with them in the right possible way. So we've made a conscious choice of sorts to be able to not over innovate of sorts in that space.
So you need to know what your framework is.
Yes. And I can choose to innovate more, but I don't want to. Because I want to build a relationship with the regulator. And by the way, it's very possible. With this regulator, it's possible. If I were in any other space, say lending or in insurance, I would not have that much amount of flexibility. That way. So I had to choose.
So you can innovate and then present that innovation to them and say, oh, hey, this is what I want to do. Allow me to do so.
Yes. So that's how it works. So, but I do sometimes feel I can have I'm a problem solver at heart. I want to solve problems, right? So I'm kind of putting my problem solving energies in other areas or in other places. Like for example, even with my people, say HR level policies or the way we kind of the non-monetary incentives piece, right? I think I'm channeling my creativity there as well, or in other lines of business that I'm kind of contributing to. So I'm just finding an outlet for my creativity in the day.
So we keep referring to you as a problem solver. I think does that somewhere take away the being a problem solver or looking at yourself as a problem solver? Does that in any way take away the subjectivity of a situation where you're objectively and reasoning everything and you're thinking about the logical conclusions of everything, and sometimes you may look like, okay, he's not very empathetic or he's not very sympathetic or he's just... Does that equate to also sometimes being brutal or harsh?
So I think I see myself more as more of a subjective problem solver rather than a very objective problem solver. I deal a lot with the background of the emotional sides, and this is where, by the way, where Soumya kind of compliments me.
Okay.
Because she's more of an objective problem solver of sorts.
Okay, so she's the one who's
She's an objective problem solver. I am a subjective
Okay.
problem solver of sorts. So हमारे बीच में वो compliment.
So she pushes you to take the tougher choice.
She takes the tougher choices as well, but I also take tougher choices. Like for example, when it comes to dealing with certain people problems, or say some form of office politics or some form of a situation, right? Then I'm more better suited to solve for that or deal with that.
Because you practice empathy.
Because I'm able to. I'm more comfortable with that.
Okay.
She's more comfortable with very straightforward decision making, very logical decision making. के लिए I rely on her. Sometimes I get confused, factoring in all emotions of multiple people. अब क्या करूँ उसके बाद में, right? So then she is the one who can actually draw the line very clearly between point A and point B. So I think I kind of have realized that that's a very good combination for me to have real time access to.
Does that also work in a crisis situation?
Yes, absolutely. So crisis is a combination of both objectivity and subjectivity. There are emotions running high, and then there is a particular crisis to be dealt with very objectively, right? So you have to kind of mix and match both. We've had certain situations where for example, we had to communicate with someone, okay? But at the same time, how do you communicate that, right? So the objectivity and subjectivity both have to be balanced together.
This was in a crisis situation.
In a crisis situation of sorts. वो करना ही पड़ता है. You have to kind of bring in both the elements. And then how do you deal with it?
Do you enjoy a situation of crisis, or because you said that you're being like you're thinking of everything that can go wrong, you're preparing yourself for it. Now push comes to shove, or you are now there at a point where now the situation has arrived, which I knew about. So you, as a paranoid person, you were definitely expecting it to happen.
Yeah, I'm very calm when that happens, by the way.
Because you're prepared.
Because I prepared for it.
So well for it.
So now my job is to make sure that I have to clearly
pass through this.
Go through it, right? And that's where my role as the CEO of the company also kind of comes into it, wherein I'm able to kind of keep everybody calm, composed, and tell them as to, hey, this is the situation, this is how we need to deal with it, this is how we'll do it, and so on and so forth. So the preparation actually helps in having confidence as to how it's going to pan out or play out. So, that helps in a lot of ways.
Okay. So I'm just going to let you go now because I know you must be very tired and must be probably hungry also. Just a couple of more questions and then I'll let you go, I promise. What has been the best advice you've received from a VC that you've used?
There was this one, this was in 2022, December. We were fundraising at the time, and we already received a term sheet. We were in discussions to close it out, and then we were closing out the remaining round as well. Okay. So we were talking to some of the other VCs also to get in additional capital. And I remember going to this one particular VC, and I gave them a projection that, hey, I'll do. My plan is to get. Today I'm at 6.5 crores, 7 crores. I'm going to get 200 crores over the next 12 months.
Turnover?
My GTV, my volumes, right? So I'm going to get 200 crores in the next 1 year, and this is my pitch. He says, what would it take for it to be 500 crores in the next 12 months? Okay. What would it take to get to 500 crores? I said, it'll take me 3 years to get there. Next year I'll get to 100 crores, then to 250 crores, and then to 500 crores. And then he was like, what will it take to this thing? I told him 3 years. He's like, what will it take to get to it in 12 months? And that kind of struck a chord in me as to ki, or as a kuch to hua, spark in me of sorts ki, what would I need to now do to be able to get to that same milestone? So then I thought, I need to add more products. Okay, I need to expand the portfolio offerings. And that's what I exactly did eventually, right? That adding those constraints and then pushing myself to think, what can I do now? Completely shifted my perspective. Like, if I were to think as to there's that one thing, think what the number one guy would do. Yeah. Right? That actually comes from here. If I were Elon Musk and building Tap, what would Elon Musk do to get it to say $1 billion? And that kind of question kind of completely, then I think about, hey, I'll have to build a founder brand. I'll have to possibly build a product and do a large kind of a PR around it. So those ideas start coming when I kind of hypothesize and create a situation where I could think as if I were the topmost guy in the space, how would I exactly do it, right? And I think
that need not necessarily be what the top guy will actually do.
Yes.
It's just something
I'm imagining. Right? And that the ability to imagine and remove those constraints is what VC capital is supposed to do. And this is that advice from a VC, right? Or that question from a VC, I'm taking it as an advice now, was a very fundamental shift in my line of thinking. Nowadays, I also kind of push myself. I'm like, I want to get to 10,000 users. Then I'm like, what will it take for me to get to 1 million users? And then I'm like, okay, if I were to do 1 million users in a month, what do I need to do? Then I build according to that. So that was a perspective shared by a VC, which was the most helpful one till date.
But sometimes that growth is restricted also by, say, capital.
Yeah.
So, but you start working towards it irrespective of whether you have the capital for it or not.
Then I use examples of people who have not used capital to get to it, right? Because there are examples of people who have not used capital and achieved a certain type of, say, scale. Say, someone like AstroTalk did not raise capital, got to 1 million users, 10 million users, right? How did they do it? They kind of 1 rupee a minute type of this thing, 50 rupees in your cash wallet, right? They did these type of initiatives which allowed them to kind of bootstrap their way to 1 million users, and capital is a constraint till you consider it to be a constraint. You will have ample amount of examples for people who have done it without it also. So it's just to be open to those ideas.
Okay.
In a way.
Okay. Last question. How has entrepreneurship changed you as a person?
I think I've seen so much amount of shit. That there are very few things which are phasing me or impacting me emotionally, I would say.
You've grown a thick skin.
I'm growing a thick skin, not grown fully, but I'm still I'm a work in progress that way. But like yesterday, I had a flight from Nasik.
Yeah.
That got cancelled. Then a flight to Hyderabad, that also got cancelled. Then everything got cancelled. Then suddenly it reopens again. Then my bags get lost. And I kind of managed to chill, relax, come back home.
Yeah. Come for this podcast.
So, I think that's what I'm just dealing with one thing at a time nowadays. So that's where I am.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much for coming on my Rinky-Dink podcast, Nischay. It was a pleasure to have you. If you have any feedback, any complaints, anything that I can make right, please let me know. I'll do everything I can to make things right now. Please let me know your feedback. I'll be more than happy.
I think this was fun. I think I enjoyed. It was good to have met you, especially a junior of mine from school. So it's always nice, and I really enjoyed this conversation.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. If you learned something new from this episode of the Horsemouth podcast, do rate and review us on Spotify, Instagram, X, or wherever people engage with you the most.